sure the last thing anyone wants or needs is another Nano Cortex video parroting Neural DSP's marketing points and telling you it's a game changer, all while glossing over any of the criticism that it's received. Equally, you probably don't need another video furiously agreeing with all of the negativity surrounding the launch of this product and the cringe-inducing marketing campaign that saw the release of this two-part monstrosity that runs almost the length of a feature film, but lacks any of the narrative mechanisms to be considered an actual work of cinema, or even watchable. I just chalked it up to they're a Finnish company. Finnish people are weird as f***. I should know. I married one.
I hope you realize that that was entirely in jest.
Yes. In fact, it is the presumption of offense that has offended me. This gives the impression that I am somehow humorless or petty. I am neither.
So I asked you guys, and thank you all so much for all of your input in the community thread. I won't be able to do every suggestion here. Some of these probably warrant their own videos, but it did give me a lot to think about when making my own analysis of the Nano Cortex. Of course, if there are things that you want to see in the future or questions that I don't cover here, leave all that down in the comments. I will do my best to include that in future videos. So I want to share with you my experience using the Nano Cortex, what it is, its pros and its cons from my testing it out, and who I think it's for. As always, or usually when I remember to do it at least, there is a timestamp table of contents down below. You can use the chapters if you want to skip around to the relevant parts of the video. Congratulations. Now, before I get started, there are also some disclaimers. I was not a part of Neural DSP's pre-launch campaign. I didn't have the Nano before it was announced, and every YouTuber released their video about how it's a game changer or the affordable quad cortex, or whatever narrative feeds into the dialogue that this is somehow more or even less than what it really is. This video is, however, sponsored by Sweetwater, who were kind enough to tip me off about the Nano Cortex a month or so before its release and sent me out this unit the day that it launched. As always, if you are interested in the Nano Cortex, or anything for that matter, use the link in the description. It helps out the channel and helps me make more content like this for all of you. Now, if there's one thing that you could say about Neural DSP, it's that they are the absolute best company at getting people to talk about them, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Although, to give credit where it's due, I do have an overall positive experience with the Nano Cortex, as I will outline in this video. The Nano Cortex is not the budget quad cortex, it's not a game changer, it's not reinventing the wheel. I think all of those titles put too much expectation on this little thing. When I first heard about the Nano Cortex, I was just told it was a smaller, more affordable unit. My imagination went off the rails and I was picturing something like the 𝐒𝐏𝐄𝐒𝐈𝐻, but with Neural DSP's classic design, which I infinitely prefer if I'm being honest. And that's kind of what we're dealing with here. The form factor and the design was pretty close to what I expected. I didn't expect for there to be no screen or to have to use your phone to interface with it, but that actually makes a lot of sense. This is personal bias here, but I actually like stuff like this. If you saw my video on the UA anti-pedal, that's a piece of hardware that I praised for hiding the tech in an app, and I think the Nano Cortex does that really well also. On the surface and first impressions, it's really on par with Neural DSP's aesthetic and the design choices that you see in the quad cortex. Guys, we're plugged into the Nano Cortex. I have that running into a Seymour Duncan power stage. I have a boost pedal in front of that. It's the Devil by my company, Obsidian Audio. If you're interested in that, you can check it out down in the description below. That's not engaged right now. We're just running into the Nano Cortex, into the Seymour Duncan power stage, into my 𝐒𝐿 4x12 cabinet. It's being mic'd up with an SE Electronics Voodoo Ribbon 1 microphone. There's no post-processing or anything. That's just going directly into my audio interface. This is what it sounds like. This is a capture of my Rev 1 Plus. It's available on the Cortex Cloud. You can download this if you want to. You might need to if you have a Nano Cortex, because you can only load captures onto the Nano Cortex. There is no amp block. We will get into that here through the course of this video, but let's just go through the app right now so I can show you everything if you haven't seen it 100 times already. But here's the layout of the Nano Cortex. We have the foot switch assignments. So you have foot switch 1, A and B, and foot switch 2, A and B. We could just switch it right here as well in the app. The next block that you have in the signal chain is the neural capture. Now this is where it gets interesting because you are very limited in the amount of blocks or like effects that you can run. The neural capture is going to probably be most people's amplifier. Most people are going to put some sort of like preamp, amplifier capture, something in this effect block to simulate a preamp. You can load up to 256 neural captures as well as 256 IRs onto this unit. Does anyone need more than 250? 256 is a lot. Seems like a lot. Next, we have our cab IR block. I have that off because I'm running through this 𝐒𝐿𝐴 cabinet. Then we have our effects section. There are the pre-effects and the post-effects. In the pre-effects, we have a noise gate, we have a pitch shifter, and then in the post, we have modulation, delay, and reverb. Over here in our settings, we can save the preset. We can create a new neural capture, which we will do in this video. We have our tuner over in the settings there if you want to use a tuner. You can not only use the app, but you can use the little lights on the actual device as well. They will blink in the middle when you are in tune. And then we have our USB MIDI out settings if you are connecting a MIDI controller to this to control it. In the settings, you can rename the Nano Cortex. You can see how many neural capture slots you are using as well as IR slots. You can control the LED brightness. I would like some more settings, as we will get into later in this video, but I just want to give you a basic idea of what's there now. And then we have our expression/MIDI input behavior. So, you can change this to expression pedal if you want to run an expression pedal into this unit. That about covers the whole app. So let's go in here. I actually changed the capture to this Brit 255 rhythm. Now let's go into the effects here. Now you can see here are the modulation effects. You don't have any different effects. You just have the one effect per block. So maybe that matters to you. Maybe you want some like crazy atmospheric shimmer reverb. That's not gonna happen. It's not on the Nano Cortex. You get the basic delay, the basic reverb, and the basic modulation. But if that's enough for you, then there are enough parameters in there to really dial them into your taste. And of course we could use the knobs here. Now if you look, you see a mount here, that is our mix. So there's our modulation. Let's go into the reverb here. You can see the reverb parameters. Even though it's super limited, the effects do sound very nice. It's gonna kind of be up to each user to decide whether you need all of the effects that would come in something like the Quad Cortex versus the very limited amount of effects that are in the Nano Cortex. Let's throw the delay on there. I mean, the main thing here is the capture blocks and what do the amps sound like. And this is just as good as the Quad Cortex in terms of like fidelity and sound quality. Let's turn on our pitch shifter and let's go back 𝐴𝐿 Energy 3. Let's go into our transpose here, and I'm just gonna drop this. I'm just gonna go -2 semitones. Now, one of the things in the marketing material is it says that the transpose tool has no noticeable latency. I kind of disagree with that. I think it does have some noticeable latency. It's not so noticeable that it's unusable. It's actually pretty good. But if you compare this to their plugins, for example, with the plugins, when I use the transpose feature, I don't really notice it at all when I'm playing. But when I use it on the Nano Cortex, there is like a bit of sag. It also feels like there's some roll off in the top end. I could be imagining this, but that's just my initial impression of it. I feel like I have to push a little bit harder when the transpose is on to get the same sort of like reaction. I assumed it would be limited like the 𝐒𝐏𝐄𝐒𝐈𝐾 or even the 𝐒𝐿𝐴. You have a very simple and fixed signal chain, which is a gate, transpose or pitch shifter, a single capture block, an IR block, a modulation block, a delay block, and a reverb block. That's it. No moving them or swapping them. That's the chain. I gotta be honest, on paper that sounds bad, but in reality, in playing with it, I found out that I didn't really care at all. If I stop and think about it, I don't believe that I really use a lot of effects when I play, and if I do, it's usually a little reverb and a delay on a lead patch, or even the occasional clean patch. Oh my God. I know, I said clean patch. Now there aren't multiple options with these effects like the 𝐒𝐿𝐴, for example. These are just single effects that you can turn on or off, but they do have a fair amount of adjustable parameters. If you're looking for a shimmer reverb though, there isn't one here. Yet. I say yet because when the Quad Cortex was released, it felt like a barren wasteland for effects. If any of you early adopters can attest to this, I remember getting my original unit and thinking to myself, where is everything? But very oddly with the Nano, I don't feel as offended by this. Maybe it's because I didn't pay for it myself, maybe it's because the Quad Cortex has so much more marketing hype, but I think it's just because that when you look at this tiny little thing, it doesn't feel like there's a large expectation to have so many different effects and features built into it. One effect that I was disappointed not to have though is an overdrive or a boost block. Now let's turn on a boost pedal. I'm gonna go back to the capture of my Rev 1 Plus. Now, big criticism that I see a lot online, people are really upset that there's no boost block. Most of us metal guys like to boost amplifiers, and you would just assume that Neural DSP would include that because pretty much every plugin they have has like a boost section with overdrives, but not the case with the Nano Cortex. There is no boost block. However, I do have the Devil pedal in front of this right now. Let's turn that on. You can see how I have it set. And let's see if the Nano Cortex can handle a boost in front of it. It can handle a boost really well, and this is a very high output boost. Again, if you're interested in one of these boosts, you check the description down below, but it handles a boost really well. The only deal is that this gain light is going to flash. But in terms of like the sound, I think it sounds really good. And I think most people that would be interested in the Nano Cortex probably have at least one boost pedal laying around, right? If you don't, get a Devil boost. But it would be nice if they added a boost block down the road, give you the ability to load at least like a Tube Screamer or something into the Nano Cortex so you don't have to have this additional pedal, but you know, it is what it is. I think it's fine. This is another complaint though, where I found myself quickly not being bothered by it when I ran my own overdrive pedal in front of the Nano Cortex. It took a boost pedal really well, and its design just lends itself to wanting to be on a board with other pedals. And when you take that into consideration, I think I could personally give it a pass here. Now, one of the things that I really like about the design of the Nano Cortex is it's actually a bus-powered audio interface. I think the size really lends itself well to being an audio interface. I personally like desktop audio interfaces that have a volume control so that it's in reach whenever I'm mixing or whatnot. When using the Nano as an audio interface, you also have the option of using the combo jack on the side as an XLR jack if you want to use it for a microphone. You can of course use the built-in effects and captures if you want to use this to monitor your guitar or even reamp, although the lack of dedicated output for reamping does make the routing for that a bit tricky. Speaking of the routing, let's talk about a big con for me personally. You cannot run an IR out of one output and a direct signal out of the other output with the Nano. It's common practice to run your direct preamp sound to a power amp and cabinet for stage volume out of one output, but run the other output with a cabinet IR to front of house. This just removes having to mic a cab on stage and allows you to have a much better signal to front of house with less chance of a bad mic placement from a sound guy. It also helps declutter the stage. I went through all the options and even tried to cheese this by adding a stereo IR that was panned with one side being the IR and the other side being empty, but it didn't work. I'm really hoping this gets fixed in the future because I think it would add a ton of flexibility to the pretty locked down routing that the Nano currently has. Now let's talk about the cornerstone of the whole unit, the captures. There are no audible differences to the fidelity of the capture in my experience, despite this being a much smaller and more affordable unit. You can also create captures with the Nano Cortex. However, despite there being a dedicated capture button on the face of the unit, you do need the app on your phone to facilitate this process. Okay, so now I'm going to attempt to capture a Neural DSP plugin. This is the Fortin Nameless Suite X plugin. This isn't even currently available on the Quad Cortex at the time of shooting this video, so, you know, making a capture kind of makes sense. My guitar is plugged into the Nano Cortex. I have that 4-cable methoded id into my interface, and I have the app open here. Let's go up here and let's go to create a new neural capture. It's going to take you through the process of hooking up your Nano Cortex. And let's go. Okay, so that's what the Fortin Nameless plugin sounds like the way I have it set. I actually want to capture this without a cabinet. So let's go in here and let's turn the cabinet off. And we're gonna start the capture. It's doing its thing. It's 9:43 right now. We'll see how long this takes. don't think the capture came out bad at all. I think it sounds pretty good. Let's go back to the Rev 1 Plus though. The capture of my actual amplifier is more dynamic, and I don't know if that's because, you know, it's an analog piece of gear versus a plugin. That might be the case. It might be user error. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that one. But it is technically possible to capture the plugins just like it was with the Quad Cortex before they started adding plugin support for that. So, you know, if you really want your plugin tone, you can probably spend some time dialing that in and getting a good capture of it. It is a possibility. That's mostly what I'm trying to demonstrate. Okay, I want to try to do an actual amplifier capture with the Nano Cortex and see how that turns out by comparison to these other ones. Now the boost is before the Nano Cortex in this case, so we wouldn't be capturing it with the boost if, you know, I left it on during the capturing process. I'm not. I just want to hear how it's reacting, and then that way we could do the same when we do the capture and compare, you know? Let's start the capture. The capture actually sounds better, I think. Let's load that capture up now and see if it reacts the same to a boost. The process itself is pretty much a one-to-one process of using the Quad Cortex and is very user-friendly for the most part. The size factor of the Nano really does lend itself to the capture process as well. The Quad Cortex was never really an issue in the size department, but when I would use it to capture gear, it's really awkwardly shaped to place on top of an amp head or even on my desk with the additional load box or the occasional DI box that I would use in the capturing process. I guess my takeaway here is it's not a critical feature, but it's nice to have a smaller unit to occupy less real estate when I'm capturing things. One thing that is much improved in the process though is the fact that this unit can be powered by a normal 9-volt adapter that you probably have lying around for your other pedals. This is a big win for me personally because I lost my Quad Cortex adapter and now have to use a third-party power supply. This might seem like a small thing, but when you are in a cramped workspace, all these little things can add up and make your workflow a lot tidier. And in my opinion, that's essentially what this is. This is a small capturing device with some additional bells and whistles. It's not a budget version of the flagship unit, although it can be an affordable way to enter their ecosystem, but I think that puts too much expectation on it. It's really just a capture player that can capture on its own, which is pretty important. Here's why. All of that comes in at $549 US. So where does it fit? Well, there's only really 2 or maybe 3 other things in that range that I can think of that are similar units. The 𝗏𝐿𝐿 pedal and the Kemper player. So in comparison to the 𝗏𝐿𝐿 pedal, it has more built-in effects, which isn't hard since the 𝗏𝐿𝐿 pedal really doesn't have any aside from the reverb. And while the 𝗏𝐿𝐿 pedal is $150 less, you have the 𝗏𝐿𝐿 pedal, which is even smaller and nearly $400 less, but neither of those pedals do any capturing from the pedals themselves. You need a computer and an audio interface to do that. So what about the Kemper player? It's more expensive at $698 at the time of making this video, and with that extra money, you do technically get more effects. The Kemper ecosystem is also friendly to third-party sales, so there are a lot more options and it isn't locked down through a centralized app, but it can't create profiles from the device. You need to buy the flagship unit if you want to do that, and that's where this fits in. You can take it in your pocket, bring it to your friend's house, create captures of their amplifiers, and do all of that without worrying you're going to crack the glorious touchscreen like the flagship unit. And it's a lot cheaper too. The last thing I want to mention here, because it's similar and checks at least some of these boxes, is the Headrush Core. However, this is a much larger and full-featured unit, but it does have cloning, their version of capturing or profiling. So who is this for? I would say if you are interested in capturing, like that is your main prerogative, both creating them and playing them, and you like the perks of having a small travel-friendly interface that you can load them on, then yeah, the Nano's probably for you. Thank you so much to Sweetwater for sponsoring this video. Thank you for being here with me. If you like it, make sure to hit the like button. If you really like it, then consider subscribing or joining us with these beautiful people over here on Patreon, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys.